All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're taking a trip to the island nation of Vanuatu. It's a place where a really compelling story about climate change, science, and just incredible human resilience is playing out right along its coastlines.
Just take a look at this scene. At first glance, it might just look like a flooded road, maybe a hassle for an afternoon. But for the communities in Vanuatu, this is becoming an everyday reality, and it represents a huge problem for daily life. And that really makes you wonder, right? What actually happens when the one road you need to get to school, or to the market, or to a hospital can just be completely swallowed by the tide? The stakes here are just incredibly high. And that's because these coastal roads, well, they're so much more than just a strip of pavement. For Vanuatu, they are absolute lifelines.
I mean, we really have to understand, when these roads flood, it's not just about your commute being a little longer. It means farmers literally can't get their crops to market. It means kids can't get to school, and folks can't get to a doctor. And maybe most important of all, in an emergency, these are the only evacuation routes. They are absolutely essential to the economy and society of these islands.
So, the big question is, why is this happening more and more often? Well, to get to the bottom of that, we need to dive into the science of the sea. The key idea we need to wrap our heads around is something called extreme sea level. And it's not just one thing. Think of it more like a perfect storm. A whole bunch of different forces all piling on top of each other at the exact same time to push the water to its absolute highest point.
Now this is fantastic because it shows you that recipe for flooding perfectly. So if you look at that diagram on the left, you can see all the different ingredients. You start with your baseline, which is the mean sea level. Then you add the regular predictable tides. Then maybe a storm rolls in and creates a surge, pushing even more water toward the coast. And then you have the waves on top of all of that. As you can see on the right, when all those layers stack up, bam! That's when you get these extreme events that cause all this flooding.
So, how do you take all that science and turn it into something useful? Well, scientists aren't just winging it. They're using all this data to literally map out what the future could look like. They feed all that information into these powerful computer models, and out come these incredibly detailed maps, just like this one. See all the areas in blue? That's the land that gets swamped during one of those extreme events. And you can see that road, highlighted in yellow, running straight through the danger zone. But here's the thing, this problem isn't standing still. This chart really tells the whole story. That black line, that's what we've actually measured. You can already see it's trending up. But now, look at the projections for the rest of the century. Those different colored bands are different possible futures depending on global emissions. Blue is low emissions, red is high emissions. But in every single scenario, that curve gets steeper. The rise is picking up speed.
And in a high-emissions world, that acceleration leads us straight to this number. By 2090, the median projected sea level rise is 0.73 meters. That's almost 3/4 of a meter, about 2.5 feet higher than it was just a few decades ago. Just let that sink in.
But, and this is a really important but, that future is not set in stone. The data actually points to two very different possibilities, and the one we get depends on the choices we're all making all over the world right now.
It really just boils down to this. If we're in a low-emissions world, the seas still rise, but it's slower. The impacts are something you can actually manage, and crucially, it buys Vanuatu more time to adapt. But in a high-emissions world, the rise is fast, the flooding is everywhere, and the disruption is just devastating. And if you want to see what that choice actually looks like on the ground, well, this is it. These two maps show the exact same piece of road in the year 2050. On the left, that's the flooding in the low-emissions world. On the right, that's the high-emissions world. The difference in how much land is covered by that dark blue water is just staggering.
This chart basically puts hard numbers to those pictures we just saw. It shows how many kilometers of road are expected to be underwater during a major flood. And you can just see the threat growing over time. From 2030 to 2050 to 2090, the length of road that gets inundated just keeps getting longer and longer.
But this story is not one of doom and gloom. It is absolutely a story about resilience. Because the people of Vanuatu are already hard at work, building a safer future and fighting back against that rising tide.
And the great news is they have a playbook. They've got a plan, and it's full of practical, common-sense stuff. Things like raising the most important roads, or even moving them, building seawalls where they need to, but also using nature itself, like planting mangrove forests to protect the coast. And it's all guided by ongoing research to make sure they're doing the right thing in the right place.
And this isn't just some plan sitting in a binder on a shelf. This picture shows it all. Work is already happening. People are out there, on the ground, right now, building these climate-resilient roads. They're turning all that science and all those plans into real-world action.
So that kind of leaves us with one last big thought. Vanuatu's struggle with its coastal roads, it's really a snapshot of a much bigger global challenge. Their story isn't just about them. In a way, it's about all of us. So the real question is, how can their journey, their road to resilience, inspire a whole world that's facing the exact same rising tide?